Hello, happy October. I know we have parent-teacher conferences coming up at the end of the month. I really hope that your student shows up for the Zoom call as well. It's always great to have that triangle conversation with them. I'm getting a lot of questions about the outcomes-based assessment, the marking policy, and so I thought I would just send out a quick video to address that. If that's your only question, then hopefully this answers that, and you don't have to fit in another Zoom session into your life right now. So first of all, outcomes-based assessment is an RVS mandate, not mandate, an RVS initiative that they're trying to roll out to the entire RVS schools. You've been seeing it a lot already in elementary and middle school, and now we're ready to implement it in the high school. At Springbank, we've been doing it for the last 4 years. So we are at the forefront of this and quite adversed in how to do it in chemistry and physics, and worked out a lot of kinks along the way. And I really wholeheartedly believe that this is the best for student learning. It is the best for them to navigate their understanding and grow in their understanding. So there's 3 things I want to cover in this video. The holistic marking and what that looks like and why. And then what it looks like in Powerschool in terms of like the layout of why you don't, the quiz bin layout versus the outcomes layout, and then a growth mindset that this program offers. So the first thing I want to do is I want to share with you a screen and talk about this holistic marking policy. So the holistic marking scheme, as I said, you've seen already in elementary school. It comes in a whole big document here that RVS has produced. I'll send a link to this document so that you can read through it in your extra spare time that we all have. And you can learn all about the benefits and pedagogy of real-time reporting, is what it's called in the earlier grades, or outcomes-based assessment. Here are the descriptors and the rubrics that follow them. And all we've done in the grade 11, 12 aspect is convert these into numbers. So mastery is your 5. Advancing is 4, progressing is 3, emerging is 2, beginning is 1. And so mastery is, if we're learning an outcome, can they answer the as it says there, the in-depth, the demonstration, the application. So those application questions that are super creative and they've never seen before, and can they bring in other concepts perhaps into answering that question, that shows me that they have a mastery understanding of that outcome. Advancing would be, can they do the harder questions, but not necessarily that like application question. Progressing is grade level. So progressing means, are they covering the questions that we've done in class, the basic questions, that overall bulk of the material we've been covering and they've seen lots? Can they give that back to me? Can they say their definitions? Can they give me the examples that I gave them? So as you can see, that's not really mastering the material. They can only just sort of do what I did. They can't go beyond or analyze or interpret. Those would be advancing and mastery. So progressing, a 3 is a good mark. It means that you have the basic information. You just can't stretch it to any kind of different, like next level. Emerging is a 2. It means you're starting to learn the information, but you don't have a great grasp on it. 1, beginning, meaning you are well beginning in your journey, and a 0 will mean that they didn't put anything down. It's a blank sheet. They haven't got at all anything down. And that's how they or what they put was, I don't know, a drawing, whatever, anyway. So that's the descriptors, and we've just converted those into numbers so that Powerschool can handle it a bit better. Okay, so, and they've seen it in Science 10, but you still have the descriptors in Science 10. They were trialing that out. So we've put numbers down instead of the descriptors. I like the numbers better. Actually, it means more to me. And so that's the holistic marking policy, and that's what it's based on. So when they do a quiz, what I'm looking at is, were they able to answer the mastery questions? Yes or no? Yes, they're hedging on a 5. And even if they made a couple minor errors, even in a basic question, then they would have a 4.5. almost a 5, right? And if they answered the basic questions, the ones that we've done in class, they've done a good job about them, but they can't kind of go above and beyond into anything that was difficult or interpretive, then they're sitting at a 3 out of 5. And then it doesn't matter how many mastery questions I put on there. It just matters if you can answer them or can't answer them. And so that's the holistic approach, because it would, a traditional mark of a 74%, because they have 74 questions right out of 100, would change if I only put 98 questions on the test instead of 100, or it would change if I put lots of really hard questions or not. And so those traditional marks are actually, I think, arbitrary. It's quite arbitrary to get a 73 versus a 74. It just means whether I made the quiz out of 11 or 10, if I happen to put on an extra question. And if that question was hard, that extra question was hard or easy, it would change that percentage as well. So, you know, the math actually is actually arbitrary in traditional marking systems. And so this holistic marking system is a much better analysis of where that kiddo is at in their learning journey, and what their core understanding is of that outcome. Okay, so that's the holistic approach to marking. What it looks like in Powerschool. So in Powerschool, you're not going to see the bins that we regularly have in traditional marking systems. So there's no quiz bin and unit exam bin and final exam bin. They're just these outcomes, one big bin of outcomes plus your final exam, which is, you know, tagged on at the end of the year. So this, or diploma for my grade 12s. And so this outcome bin is weighted in little columns. And so you can see here, so this is a student of my Chem 20s, and this student is at an 87% overall. And how Powerschool has calculated that is they've taken this 4 and this 5 and this 3.5. And let's say we only had these 3 marks, it would have divided that by 15, right? It takes an average of all of these scores because they're all weighted the same. And that's how it gets this 87%. Okay, so this kiddo wrote their very first quiz of the year, which was all about, this is Chem 20, so this was all about naming ionic compounds, naming molecular compounds, naming ions, naming atoms. So here's their review quiz, and this kiddo gets a 3.5. So that means to me that she or he was answering most of the basic questions, but they maybe got an advancing question, or maybe they got an advancing question, or maybe there was only one advancing question about half right, something like that, that showed me that they were bordering on advancing. Probably they got half their advancing questions right and all of their basic questions right. So that puts them at a 3.5. And so they get this 3.5 on their quiz. It's in the same outcome as this A1 outcome. And I know your Powerschool looks slightly different. I have kids as well in the Rocky View system, and I know that our Powerschool looks very different on the app, and it looks very different on the laptop, but this is the teacher version of it. So here I have, which also looks different. So here in this other bin of A1 is their second quiz. So they wrote another quiz, and in this second quiz, we tested their A1, A2, A3 outcomes. So they had 3 different outcomes that we were looking at in this test. So this one might have been question 1 and 2. This is question 3 and 4. And outcome A3 is question, I forget where I ended up, 5 and 6 maybe. Okay, so I look at question 1 and 2, which is all about naming ionic and molecular compounds, ions and atoms, just like their quiz was, only it'll have fewer questions on it because it's got 3 outcomes, you know, it's a longer quiz. So here this person gets a 4 on that, meaning they have got all their advancing questions, but no mastery questions answered correctly. So they have all their all their advancing questions, answered, which means, and this is the beauty of this system, that this kiddo has learned from their past mistakes of their first quiz, figured out how to do advancing questions through practice, through corrections, through whatever, and is no longer a 3.5. They are now a solid 4. they can answer advancing questions if I throw them at them. And so this 3.5 gets exempt, thrown out, and that category is now a 4. So Powerschool ignores their past mark and has replaced it with a 4. This ability for this child to see that if they're allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to stumble and trip on their learning journey, allows them or gives them the feeling that it's okay to take risks. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not completely understand something you just learned yesterday. That's all right. As long as we learn from our mistakes and as long as we're progressing on our learning journey, and then we take stock and we can show evidence that we have progressed, that's our new who we are. That's our new replaced mark, that should be where we're at. Now, I'm hoping that this kiddo who wrote their bonding test, like their unit exam, so one extra step, has now learned from their mistakes on their mastery questions, has practiced a little bit of more mastery level things, and can now further advance their mark, which then means that this 4 will be thrown out and replaced with a 4.5 or a 5. So they're not in traditional marking, you would have a quiz bin and all these quizzes would be averaged together. So if you really bombed a quiz because you just broke up with your significant other, or you're just having a bad day, or you're not a morning person or whatever, and you have a really bad quiz, you can throw that out, as opposed to traditionally that bad quiz is averaged with your good day, your last thing of the day, your flying high as a kite day, right? That those quizzes don't average now from a 0, 100 averaging to a 50, but rather it's replaced. If you had a bad day, it's a 0. If you have 100 now, you have shown your mastery, and that's replaced too. So let's have a look again. So here's an A2 category. So here's an A2 here. Assignment 7 is an A2. She has a 5 on it. She can answer the mastery questions. And here's another A2 answering mastery questions again. So she's repeated her understanding to me. That shows that she's truly mastery. A3, she had a 4. She's increased in her I keep thinking it's a girl, but actually, to be honest, I don't know who it is. So here's A3 as a 4 and A4 as, oh, pardon me, I lost my thought. A3 and A3. So she's gone from a 4 to 4.5. You can see that 4 has been exempt. You can see that because it's purple and italicized. So the 4 has been exempt and she's now a 4.5 or he. We've only had the chance to do one quiz on A4, 5, 6. So this is their first understanding. And then their second understanding is on the unit test. And hopefully they have grown in their understanding. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to get asked, well, what happens if their mark goes down? Right? What happens if they have a 3.5 on their first attempt and on their second attempt, they get a 2.5? And that can happen because, of course, as we advance in the unit and they have more balls to juggle, it becomes harder. And so actually what Powerschool will do is it'll average those marks. They'll both stay in there. They'll average like the traditional system. But and that kind of makes sense to me even pedagogically, because if they had a 5 on their first quiz and then a 3 on their second quiz, it shows me that they were able to answer mastery questions. I'm making a recording. Oh, 1 minute. I'm so sorry. So yes, as I was saying, the computer system will average them, and that kid truly wasn't mastery if they can't do it at the same time as doing other things. They could only do it when they were just, had blinders on and just on the one subject. Okay, so I think that's it. I think that it offers a growth mindset. I think it offers a better understanding of where the kid is. Oh yes, one more thing. So the other piece to not having a quiz bin, unit exam bin, etc., but rather having an outcome bin, is I can use other pieces of evidence to help support that child. So if that child is, although most of the Powerschool is made up of quizzes and unit tests, but if that child has test anxiety or is just generally nervous about tests, for example, I was marking my Chem 30s, and a couple of them had no idea how to do multiple choice and numerical response bubble sheets. Online learning, COVID. So that's not really the point, is it? The point is, how are they doing in their outcome? So I can use conversations that we've had. I can use lab report write-ups that they've done. I can use group discussions that I've overheard in order to assess how they are in that outcome. I once had a kid come up to me and he completely had bombed his unit test and his quiz before that. And so he was sitting at like a 2 in his outcome. And it was just before the diploma exams, and he had came into my room for some extra help, and he was expressing how he was so bummed about that mark. And he's just like, I just feel like it's pulling down my whole grade. And even though it's one of the 40 marks, but whatever, he was really upset about it. So I said to him, I said, all right, well, what would you do if you saw a question like this on the diploma? And can you explain that a little deeper for me? And we just had this conversation about it. And he was like whipping off information about this outcome that he was like completely far reaching and in-depth explanation of it. He's not a 2 out of 5 anymore. He's a 5 out of 5. He expressed true mastery of that outcome. And so I was able to say to him, I was like, you know what? You are a mastery in that outcome. And I changed the grade for him. So it really does allow for a kid to be able to express their understanding in a variety of different ways, not just quizzes and unit tests, but rather also projects and conversations, etc. So I think I hope that helps clear out some understanding about outcomes-based assessment and how it looks. The biggest complaint I'm getting is that the traditional mark doesn't match the holistic mark. I can tell you they are not traditionally marking properly. I had a kid that brought up his paper to me and he was like, I'm sure this is a 90% and I've counted all the marks, and they just don't see that these things are actually mistakes. And so I marked it traditionally and I got a 74, which is why I keep saying that number today, 74. But anyway, so I mark it traditionally. He's got a 74. I gave him a 70 holistically. So it is pretty spot on. And if your child is still stuck in that mindset that I really got a really high mark and you gave me a really low mark, they should just bring their test to me. I'll traditionally mark it for them and mark, this is 1 out of 2, this is 2 out of 2. And they will be able to see that they're actually pretty close. The first year I did this, I took like 5 kids of various ranges, the like bottom marks, middle marks, top marks, took a group of those students, and I traditionally marked all of their stuff whilst I was doing outcomes-based with everybody. So I could keep 2 mark books just to see how it worked. And they were pretty close. The outcomes-based assessment was about 5% higher. So there is some mark inflation that happens with this system, which isn't a bad thing when you're applying for university. But they were pretty close in marks, right? An 82 was traditionally was an 86 or whatever in Powerschool. And so it's good. I've only had one kid at the end say to me that they still hate outcomes-based assessment. Every other kid I've won over into being like, yes, this is the best thing ever. And that might be helpful too for your grade 11 kid to reach out to some of my grade 12 kids, and maybe they have a better outlook on how to explain this than I do. Okay, so if there are any more questions about outcomes-based assessment or the marking policy, or you just don't understand how your particular assessment works, I'm happy to talk through that specifically with you and navigate exactly what they mean, or your child. I'm always in my classroom at lunch before school focuses. So yes, and my focus sessions, Reese's Pieces, run first thing in the morning. I know, cute, hey, Reese's Pieces, Reese Brown, yeah. Run first thing in the morning, and I give like I'm actually lecturing, like I'm actually teaching and reminding and giving the ins and outs and top tips and watch out for and expect one of these questions. And so of the past material that they've been doing over the past week. So it's a good session for your kid to come into if they're feeling a little overwhelmed, lost. Yes. And of course, as I say, practice makes passing in chemistry. You can't just watch hockey and expect to be in the NHL. It doesn't work that way. You got to actually show up for the practice and do those drills. Otherwise, I'd be an NHL player, but I'm not. Okay, so any questions, please ask me, send me an email. I'm happy to answer anything, but I hope that clarified things up. Have a great day.